All right, so we are live, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And of course, there are no classrooms right now. You guys are all stuck at home, so we really appreciate you tuning in as we continue to bring amazing scientists, explorers, and facilities from around the world to you guys. We are going to be hosting over 100 live broadcasts in the month of April alone, and we really appreciate you guys tuning in. Quick logistical note before we dive in, literally and figuratively. Today we are using the Slido app. So if you guys want to pick some questions, upvote your favorites, take part in some fun interactive games and polls, go to Slido. I'll link it in our YouTube chat bar and use the code SHARK. So use the code SHARK, event code today, and that's how you'll be able to take part. So, of course, the reason we're all here is we are joined live by Tally. She is an educator at Ripley's Aquarium of Canada in the heart of downtown Toronto. And even though the aquarium is closed to the public, animal care goes on. And so today we are going to continue our series with them, and we are going to join her live for a sand tiger shark feed at their dangerous lagoon, the biggest tank in the aquarium. I'm not going to steal her thunder, so we're going to turn it over to Tally and explore this really, really cool facility. So thanks so much for joining us today, Tally.
Perfect. Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, so my name is Tally. I'm one of the educators here at Ripley's Aquarium of Canada. If you guys have ever been to the aquarium, you probably remember our largest tank, the big shark tunnel, and it's probably looking a little bit different from up here on top of the catwalk. So this is actually our largest exhibit from the aquarium. It has over 2.8 million liters of water and over 7,000 or over 6,000 species or individuals of fish in here. So today, in a couple moments, we're going to be actually watching our large sand tiger sharks get fed, as well as a couple different species. So if you have been to the aquarium and you've been through our shark tunnel, you might know our sand tiger sharks as being the crazy large species with a very scary looking teeth. It'll be a bit easier to see in a couple moments as we turn the air lifts off and get ready for their feed. I believe our aquarists are just running a couple moments behind because we actually just had some scuba divers in here 5 minutes ago. So they are just finishing getting out so that they can commence the shark feed. So inside this tank, we have some sand tiger sharks. We have sandbar sharks. We have 2 sawfish. We have green sea turtles, some rough-tail stingrays, nurse sharks, as well as dozens of other species of fish. And the sharks are actually pole fed. So now that the aquarists aren't here, this might be actually a good opportunity to show you what this pole looks like from the back. So it's actually just a long piece of PVC pipe with a large little net on the, or a little pipe at the bottom of there. And they're going to be putting some large pieces of fish on the end of there in order to feed our sharks. So I'll wait until they come out to explain their feeding a little bit more. But here at the aquarium, we usually go through about 800 pounds of fish every single week in order to feed the different species. And this actually all comes from a restaurant provider. So if you guys are ever at a grocery store and buying any seafood for your family, it's going to be the exact same stuff that we are going to be giving our fish here. So we're making sure to give them some top quality seafood. So some of the favorites of our large sharks are squid, hake, mackerel, and bonito. I believe today they're going to be getting some squid, some herring, and some hake. We're going to see that in a few moments. And while the sharks are being fed, we also will have another one of our aquarists who's going to be over here in the corner, and he's going to also be feeding some of the smaller fish within this tank. So I'll see if I can get a little bit closer so you guys can see what he's actually holding in his bucket. And he's going to be feeding the smaller fish within this tank. All right, what do you got in there? So inside this bucket, he's got lots of squid, some clam tongue, some capelin, and some krill. And he's actually going to be sitting in this corner as well as another one of our aquarists in the far corner. And they're going to be feeding the smaller fish at the same time as the sharks get fed. And the reason for this is because we actually like to draw the fish into the corners in order to make sure that the fish are kind of out of the way because the fish will actually eat all of the shark's food, not the other way around. So they're getting that at the same time. And looks like our aquarists are getting ready to come out here as the airlifts here have just turned off. So the airlifts there are what was making that flow at the top of the water there. And turning those off is actually like a little simple, little cue for our animals that there's about to be food. So we do this in a variety of our other tanks like Ray Bay. And here they come holding large buckets of what looks like lunch. The lights are off, so that's another one of the cues for our animals. And as our aquarists are coming over, I'll see what they have in those buckets. So it usually takes a whole team of aquarists in order to feed the large sand tiger sharks. And this actually happens about 3 times every single week on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and on Sundays. So one of the most frequent questions that we get here at the aquarium is how come these sharks do not eat the other fish within this tank? And the reason for that is because our sharks are fed 3 times a week, which doesn't seem like a lot to you guys, who might eat maybe 3-4 times every single day. But for a large shark, they really only need to eat once every single week. So we're overfeeding them by quite a lot in order to make sure that they don't go hunting all of our other fish. Part of the reason I think that they don't go for some of the fish as well is because they are a little spoiled here at the aquarium. If you look inside these buckets, a lot of this fish is actually without heads or without tails. And so they're getting pretty spoiled. They're not getting any of the stuff that they don't want. And so I don't think they even want to go for any of the live fish within this tank. So as you can see, the aquarists are getting set up here. They're putting those fish on the end of those poles. And this is actually a form of target training. So if you guys have joined us for any of our other exploring sessions, you might have noticed our turtles and as well as our stingrays are also target trained. So target training is where we basically get the animals associated with a target in order to become comfortable with approaching an aquarist or with comfortable with approaching that target in order for us to maybe do any vet checkups in the future. So over time, these sharks have learned that they can approach these yellow poles and they're going to get rewarded with food. So right now, it's pretty easy for them to approach any of the divers or the aquarists. Now, as they're doing that, one of our aquarists is also running back and forth and also recording which sharks are eating. So we have 10 sand tiger sharks in here, I believe, and each one is actually easily differentiated by different markings and different scars that they have along their backs and along their sides. So for example, we have Hawaii, who is one of our male sharks, and he has actually the Hawaiian Islands in markings along his side. So that's how we can tell him apart. The reason that we need to make sure that we can tell each shark apart from each other is because we want to make sure they get about 2 to 3% of their body weight in food every single week. So each shark is obviously going to be getting a slightly different amount of food than the others. Now, we often also get asked if sharks are dangerous or if our dive team or if our aquarists are ever nervous with any of these sharks biting them. And the reason is, of course, no. So like I mentioned before, we actually had some scuba divers that were inside this tank literally just 5 minutes ago, right before the shark feed. And they'll usually be inside this tank about 3 times every single week. So usually it'll be on like a Monday and a Thursday and a Saturday morning. And the reason that we have our scuba divers entering this tank is not because it's just fun, but also just so that they can do a little spring cleaning in here. The fish and the sharks definitely do not clean up after themselves as much as we would like. So we do have to have our divers go in to wipe the acrylic that's in there and also to scrub any of the algae that grows on top of the rocks. Let's see if we can get a good look at the shark here. So our divers, as I mentioned, will be in there usually about 3 times every single week in order to clean. And they told me that they're not at all afraid of our sharks eating them or biting them. It's a huge misconception that sharks are these man-eating monsters. Usually we see these types of things on the media and on the news and on movies such as like Jaws. And there's a whole bunch of crazy shark movies out lately. But in reality, there's only about 5 to 10 people every single year who are killed by sharks. So this is not a lot at all when you consider the population of the planet, and also that more people every year are killed just from cats and from dogs and from mosquitoes, and some crazy things such as vending machines and champagne corks. And I actually was reading recently, more people are dying lately from selfies, where people aren't paying attention to where they're walking and stuff like that. So definitely not something that you need to be afraid of, but something that you need to respect. So when we're in the ocean, we need to remember that they are wild animals. You don't usually approach wild animals on land, so we shouldn't be doing it in the ocean either. We just need to make sure that we respect their space, that we don't maybe have them mistake us for a predator. So sharks only want to bite their food, or only want to bite anything that's trying to harm them. And realistically, we're neither. So they're not something that we need to be afraid of. However, that being said, our dive team has told me numerous times, and I've actually seen it on numerous occasions, that the things they really need to look out for are the angelfish and the blue tangs within this exhibit. So they might be the really pretty fish that you guys might remember from like Finding Dory and Finding Nemo, but those fish tend to really go after the hair of our divers. So a lot of our divers have longer hair that they really have to remember to tie up or to hide with like a little like hair mask in order to hide that from the fish, because the fish will pick and give them little haircuts when they're inside this tank. And I've actually been told by our dive team that the tank that they actually get bitten the most in the entire aquarium is our rainbow reef exhibit. It is not Dangerous Lagoon. It's the tank with all of our tropical fish. So let's see if we got a hit over here. Sharks might be a little shy right now. Now, a couple things about our sharks as well. You guys might know that sharks frequently lose their teeth. Sand tiger sharks have 3 rows of teeth, and about every 2 weeks, those teeth will actually fall out. So we're constantly finding teeth within the bottom of this exhibit. And it's one of the things that our dive team actually has to do when they're going through is pick up all of those teeth from the bottom and from the sediment. And we're all starting to have a pretty big collection of shark teeth here at the aquarium. So as those teeth fall out, a new tooth that is growing in the back will actually just kind of generate and move forward like a conveyor belt, essentially. So I think I was reading that over one shark's lifetime, they can go through up to like 35,000 teeth in a lifetime. So they're constantly generating more and more.
Very cool.
Now, with our sand tigers, a really important thing to know is that they are listed as vulnerable under the IUCN, which is an organization that does studies on the populations and population numbers of various other species, and to see what we can do to maybe protect them in the future. So sharks are really at risk from people as the biggest thing. They don't have a lot of predators in the wild except for larger sharks, but people are a really big thing because we're hunting them a lot for their fins, for their meat, and for their oil. So shark finning is something I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of. It's when we will cut the fins off the tops of sharks and off their pec fins, and we'll usually use those in maybe a soup. Some cultures believe that this soup is good for the human body, that it has healing powers. But in reality, eating shark can actually be quite dangerous to people. It has high mercury levels, so it's not a very good thing that you want to be eating in order to maintain your own health. It's also very expensive in markets. It's said to be more of a culture of money. So also one thing you might not be aware of is that if you guys use any lipsticks or lip glosses, or if you have any cats or dogs, there's something called squalene, which is actually grown in the shark's liver. It's a type of oil, and it's used a lot as a moisturizing factor in skincare, beauty products, and even in cat and dog foods I've seen it in. Now, squalene is something that we can get from other animals. It's something that we can actually get from plants. But often people are using the squalene that is found in sharks. So that's something that you want to make sure that you are not supporting. You want to really make sure you know where a lot of your products are getting these ingredients from. Plant-based squalene is always the better way to go. A really big thing as well is just to make sure that you're eating sustainable seafood. So you don't want to support buying sharks in the grocery store, and you want to make sure that the seafood that you are buying was caught in a sustainable way so that we can make sure to have these guys in the future. Now, Jesse, should we turn this over to questions? I know a
Well,
lot of people have questions about sharks.
absolutely. Well, thank you, first of all, for a fantastic presentation. And I know the sharks aren't necessarily cooperating every second here, but if we get any taking big bites, we'll make sure to check that out. And so we're going to take questions from YouTube. For anyone tuning in at home, just let me know where you're joining from, type in questions, and we'll take as many as we can as we get to check out the shark with a big Superman symbol. How cool is that? So our first question, Maimuna wants to ask, what can we do? So you'd highlighted this at the end anyway, but if you're at home, over the next week, what are some steps that we can do to really protect sharks, these beautiful, beautiful creatures?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, a really good step is just to educate yourself and learn about what's actually in the products that you guys are buying. So take a look at maybe your favorite brands of makeup to see what kind of squalene they're acquiring. Check the labels just a little bit more closely when you're buying cat and dog foods with your parents. When you're at the grocery store, take a look out for little symbols like check by MSC or Oceanwise. Those will let you know that the food that you're buying for your parents and for your family is actually sustainably caught, which means that it's caught in a way that it isn't killing a lot of other species at the same time. It's caught in a way that we can make sure that we keep having those species in the future and keep them around. So those are some things to start, just maybe keeping an extra eye on the stuff that you are buying for your family, but also just educating yourself and letting everyone know about what's going on with our sharks.
Fantastic. I've just linked to Oceanwise's Sustainable Seafood Program on our YouTube chat bar. So if you guys want to check that out, it's a really amazing program. All right. Satara wants to know, how did you catch the sharks to keep in the aquarium? Where did they come from?
That's a good question. So with the animals at the aquarium, they usually come from a couple different places. One thing to note is that Ripley's Aquarium is actually part of the AZA, which means that it is accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums across North America, which means that we are kind of linked with a lot of the other aquariums within North America, and we can actually often trade with them as well. So some of the animals that we get have been born and bred within other aquariums. Some of them we've traded with other aquariums for animals of our own that we've had born here. We've had some sharks, our white spotted bamboo sharks, for example, that were actually born here. And some of them were caught in the wild. So some of our sand tiger sharks did come from the wild. The reason for that is because they are vulnerable. We are part of a study that is trying to get them to reproduce. So we're part of a study with Cesar that is trying to look at sand tiger reproduction in captivity. So we're trying to get these guys to reproduce and maybe help repopulate some of their populations in the wild.
Yeah. So speaking of reproducing, we get this question a lot. We haven't got it yet, but do these sharks have live births? Do they have eggs? Do sharks differ in that way?
Yeah, so sharks definitely do differ. Some of them will lay eggs, for example, our zebra sharks and our white spotted bamboo sharks. But some of them will actually have live births, which might mean that the egg was actually hatched inside the mom, or that it was just live all along, like kind of like people. The cool thing though about sand tiger sharks is that the females actually have 2 uteruses. And so in each uterus, they'll usually have about 20 eggs that will grow in each one during mating season. But then the strongest pup will actually end up eating all of his siblings. And so only one pup will survive in each uterus. So they'll have 2 pups at a time about every 2 years.
Very cool. That is gruesome and awesome all at once. All right. Caleb from Port aux Basques in Newfoundland wants to ask, what does this particular type of shark eat? So what are you feeding your sand tigers?
So the sand tigers, these large ones right here, they're getting fed today a mix of squid, hake, and herring. In the wild, though, they have a pretty broad diet. They'll eat anything from like squid to smaller sharks, to stingrays, to lobsters, to bony fish, basically anything that they get their jaws on.
Very cool. All right. Miss Gary from Woodbury, Minnesota, and thank you to you for joining us again. I know you've been in a lot of our programs this week. She wanted to ask, if you exchange sharks with another zoo or aquarium, how do you possibly transport them?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so we definitely do exchange animals. The biggest thing that I can tell you that we do quite often is actually our stingrays. So we have a lot of stingrays that are born here at the aquarium, and we frequently exchange them with other aquariums because we want to broaden the gene pool. We don't want there to be any inbreeding because we want to make sure they're as healthy as possible. So in order to do that, if, for example, we were going to take this large sand tiger shark and bring him to another aquarium, we would have him in a big tank that's hooked up to the back of a transport truck. It's a special transport truck that has like a mini life support system with mini filters and mini oxygen tanks and stuff like that to keep it going. And then it can actually be flown in various planes. So big perch planes. We've had a couple of our animals come from Australia all the way over to the United States in big planes and then transported up here in big trucks. But we always make a little pit stop before going to any other aquarium or bringing any other animals to our aquarium. In one of our private aquariums, it's not actually open to the public. It's in New York, and it's like a little quarantine aquarium. So we keep a lot of our animals in there to make sure that they're healthy, that they are perfectly cared for before we bring them into any of our facilities.
Very cool. I think the best business card of all time has got to be Shark Pilot. I really hope that someone has it out there. All right, Paige wanted to ask, how many kinds of sharks are there in the world?
How many kinds of sharks are there in the world? I don't think there's actually anyone in the world who can answer that question. I know that there are over 500 different species that we know of, but we're finding more and more every single decade. And so it's hard to tell. There's more than 500, but I'm sure there's plenty more in the wild that we haven't found yet.
Yeah, this is one of the things about the deep ocean, especially, that is fascinating, that every time we go there with a submersible, we find new species. It's like the rainforest in that we've barely explored a little, a tiny bit of it. We've explored more of the moon than we have of our oceans, is a good way of putting it. So keep an eye out there and extra room for some ample research in the future. All right, again, people, tuning in, type in questions on YouTube. I'll pass along as many as I can, but I'm going to share one of my own, which is extra shark senses. So we have our 5 senses, and I understand that sharks have a few extras for finding their prey. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, for sure. So sharks are part of a group of animals called elasmobranchs, which means that they're actually related to stingrays, and they share some pretty cool things, such as that extra 6th sense you were talking about called electroreception. So in addition to smelling their food and seeing their food, they can actually sense the electric currents that are coming off of like their heartbeats and their muscles in order to find animals that are at least a couple feet away from them without having to use any eyesight. So this is really handy for animals in the ocean because sometimes waters can be a little bit murky or it can be dark. And so they don't need to rely on those other senses to find food, which is really, really, really cool.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tally. All right, we got a question about what makes these specific sharks vulnerable. Is there any specific threats to them? You mentioned a few general ones. Anything for sand tigers?
With sand tigers and generally just any larger type of shark, a really big threat is actually just shark finning and hunting for their meat. So because these guys are so large, their fins are definitely prized a little bit more than some of the smaller species of sharks.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, Noah wanted to know how many teeth does a shark lose in a year? And while you're answering this, I'm going to bring up a picture of a shark jaw and link it into the YouTube chat bar so you guys can get a sense of all those rows of teeth. But do we know how many they lose in a year, Tally?
I am not sure off the top of my head. I know that they lose their teeth generally about once every 2 weeks, and in a lifetime they can have over 20 to 30,000. So you'll have to do some math in between there.
We didn't come for math, we came for sharks. All right, but if you get a chance to do that at home, you can get a good sense of it. So you talked about divers going in this tank. And I mean, again, I know you guys aren't open to the public right now, but I understand that people, like the public, can go in this tank too with a special program you guys have?
Yeah, so in addition to our dive team going in here, when we are open, we actually do bring guests in here. So if you guys are a licensed scuba diver, if you have just your beginner level, your open water, you can actually sign up to go scuba diving within this exhibit with our divers. So it's pretty cool. You'll be in there with 2 of our other divers, experiencing all of these sharks and fish going up to you. And it's a very, really, really up close and personal animal experience. So I've seen many of our guests get little haircuts from the angelfish and get swam up to by the turtles. And have the sharks approach very, very closely. So definitely something I would recommend if you are a licensed scuba diver.
Very neat. And I want to stress for people at home that you can get on the path to being a scuba diver from 10 years old. So once you're 10, you can start getting there and being able to breathe underwater and explore that much more of the world. So I really encourage you guys to do that. All right. Another question we got, which is how do sharks communicate with one another? Do they communicate with one another?
It's hard to say. So there's a bunch of different theories out there. Some people say that they use that electroreception where they can sense each other in order to kind of sense and communicate with each other. Some of them will also make little noises. But yeah, it's hard to say. They don't speak languages like we do. Some fish, for example, they have something called a lateral line, which they can use to communicate with each other, a little similar to that electroreception where they can sense each other in the water. But for the most part, our sand tiger sharks are actually a solitary species. They don't hang out in large groups. So there wouldn't really be a need to communicate with anyone. Usually after mating or after birth, they're mostly alone unless it's for feeding.
There you go. Fair enough. All right. Now you stressed this at the beginning, but I think it's worth repeating, and it's a question we just got. Are these sharks dangerous, Tally? Sand tiger sharks in the wild?
No, not at all. So I was actually reading something like a couple hours ago that sand tiger sharks have never once been responsible for the death of a human. So that's something to consider. But also, like I mentioned, we're not part of their natural diet. We're not part of their food. We're not part of their home, really. So when we're in the ocean, we just need to give them space, and they don't really seem to care about us either way. When our divers are inside this exhibit, they really don't seem to pay our divers any attention whatsoever. So those are some things to remember. It's not exactly like how the movies portray it. Sharks are really not out to get us. We are not tasty. We have large bones inside our bodies that they're not very well equipped to eating. We're not what they're looking for.
We are too bony to be delicious. It's something we get in a lot of conservation programs, actually, on a huge variety of animals. Most animals will flee from people. The animals that don't flee from people, the vast majority of them will just ignore us. It's very few creatures in the world that will actively come towards a person thinking of them as food. A polar bear out in the Arctic, a tiger out in the wild. These are very, very rare instances. So with sharks, just respect them like you do any other animal in the sea, and you should be fine. All right. A great question again from the duo at home. They wanted to ask, are there any freshwater sharks, Tally?
So there are definitely some sharks that have been seen in freshwater. So for example, the biggest, most popular example is probably the bull shark. So it's been seen going up like rivers. They don't primarily live in freshwater though. So their primary habitat is going to be saltwater, but they have been seen surviving for extended periods of time in freshwater or brackish water, which is like an in-between of salt and freshwater. So for the most part, saltwater is their home.
I want to stress too for people at home that that's like a remarkable ability of their bodies to be able to withstand that. Salt and fresh water might not seem too different to us, but it's like taking someone from the Arctic and putting them right in the middle of the desert in terms of an equivalence of how difficult that is to adapt to. So sharks are really, really neat. A couple more questions before we wrap up, Tally. How long have sharks been around on this planet?
Sharks have been around longer than we have, that's for sure. So they've been around since before the dinosaurs, hundreds and hundreds of millions of years. And that's pretty cool because for the most part, a lot of their adaptations remain the same. So they're definitely something that evolution chose wisely because they're still around. But unless we do something to help them in the future, they won't be around. So that's actually a really good point to make is they survived this long. They survived through the dinosaurs. They survived through all of this other stuff in the wild. And it might be humans that actually end up making them extinct.
Yeah. Sharks have survived 5 mass extinctions. They are one of the longest, most unchanged group of organisms on the planet, and we are threatening them more than pretty much anything has in that entire time span. So that's something worth considering, as Tally mentioned. Just choose things like sustainable seafood. Again, I linked to that in our chat bar. That's a great way you guys can help, and I encourage you to do so. All right, before we wrap up, we haven't got this question, but I love it, and it links to some of our other programs. What is the largest kind of shark, Tally?
What's the largest kind of shark? It's actually my favorite kind of shark. It's the whale shark. A really cool thing about these, though, is if you guys haven't heard of the whale shark, it looks like a whale and it actually feeds a lot like a whale as well. It's a filter feeder. So despite being the largest type of fish in the ocean, it actually eats microscopic organisms like plankton and krill, which is quite amazing. So definitely one of my favorite animals in the wild.
Yeah. We just did a program a couple weeks ago with a guy named Alex Hearn, who's the head of the Galapagos Whale Shark Research Project. So I'm going to link to his video in the chat bar. I really encourage you to check it out. It's an animal the size of a school bus. It's one of the most beautiful creatures in the world. So do check that out. Tally, this has been great. Before we wrap up, is there any last message you want to share with people tuning in at home about how they can learn more about the aquarium, your education efforts, or sharks in general?
Yeah, so just a couple things to note. So we are close to the public, but we are still feeding a lot of our animals. And so we're doing live feeds every Thursday and Friday with Exploring by the Sea, ideally. We're also have a website links up on our Ripley's Aquarium website called Ripley's Aquarium at Home. And it has a bunch of activities and science experiments, and any of our live videos that we'll be doing will be linked up on there. So you guys can check that out. And you can also join us tomorrow Friday at 1 p.m. if you guys want to see our spotted eagle rays way on the other side they're being fed.
I will be there too, so I look forward to seeing you guys. Ripley's, again, the eagle ray feeding is really, really neat. They get really up close with them. We did a session a couple weeks ago on this, but I encourage you to check it out tomorrow. I've also linked to the Ripley's Aquarium at home resources in the YouTube chat bar. It's just a wealth of stuff in the YouTube chat bar, really. And we really appreciate you guys tuning in today. Tally, thank you so much for taking us on a tour of the sand tiger shark feeding and of the beautiful aquarium.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right, have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and see y'all soon. Bye for now.